Hello everybody and welcome back to our podcast. You're here with your host Jasmine and
Arya.
And today we're here with a very special guest. Can you introduce yourself?
Hey everyone, I'm Tabir. I'm in year 13. I'm planning to go to Columbia University as a computer science major.
Amazing. So we're going to start off with the questions. So for those people that don't know what SAT is, could you just describe what it is and why it's important and why you have to take it?
Yeah, sure. So the SAT is essentially a standardized test that helps colleges kind of understand where you are academically, and it can help colleges kind of compare you to other applicants. It's mostly important if you're applying to the US, but there are like other countries where you can submit your SAT score to universities there as well. But since the SAT is a test made by the College Board, and the College Board is based in the United States, it is mostly like an American test for American.
Can you explain to everyone what an SAT test looks like and what the structure is, and did the shift between the physical structure and the digital?
Yeah, sure. So the SAT is out of 1,600. 800 points is for the SAT English section, and 800 points is for the SAT Math section. The English section, you can break it down into two components, which is the reading and the writing. And for the Math section, you have the calculator and the non-calculator. With this shift to digital, I don't know too much about that, but actually after I did my SAT, the College Board emailed me, and they were like, do you want to take part in a digital SAT pilot? When they were just testing out if the digital SAT is the thing that they should do. And I got paid for it, which was very nice. So I tried that out. In my opinion, the digital SAT, I'm not exaggerating, is so much easier than the one that we have right now. The reading passages are not even passages, they're like paragraphs. For the math section, the calculator that you get is literally Desmos. It's so much easier to graph on there versus a graphing calculator or whatever. I think generally it was a lot easier. I found it, and you can take breaks whenever you want as well. You can just get up, grab a granola bar, come back. I think it was a lot more chill. So I prefer the digital format. I think that you probably don't need to study as much.
Yeah, I've tried a digital SAT test, and I think it's so much shorter in general. I think the other one was 3.5 hours and this one was shorter, so it's just nicer and you can focus more because it's not that long. But also I think the common misconception is that you can only take one entrance exam, which is SAT, what we're talking about today. But I know there's also the ACT. So could you give kind of a brief lowdown on what it is and how it differs from the SAT, and kind of how students can decide which one suits them best?
Yeah, for sure. So for the ACT, like the SAT, it's also a standardized test. But what's different with the ACT is that there's also a science portion. So there's kind of this additional thing that you need to study for. When it comes down to choosing which one to do, I think the best way to do it, it's going to take a lot of time, but I think it's worth it, is take the SAT, a practice SAT at home, take a practice ACT at home, see which one you feel more comfortable with, see which one you get a better score on. For some people, the ACT just works better. I know this one girl from my old school. She literally did SAT tutoring since year 7, and she went to take the actual SAT, completely bombed it, did the ACT later, and somehow got a really, really good score, even though she'd been training for the SAT. So it really just depends on you and what works for you. So definitely don't rob yourself of the opportunity of trying the ACT. It might work better for you.
Also, if you go on to college websites, you often see test optional or test flexible. Could you explain what these mean, and what would you recommend doing? Whether to submit the score or not, or would you just...
Yeah, for sure. So test optional essentially means exactly what it says. You can submit your score if you choose to do so. A lot of people see test optional and they're great, I don't have to worry about the SAT, I just won't take it. That's another stress off my back. And I understand that mentality, but what I would do is I would take it anyways, do your best, and even if you don't get the score that you're aiming for, you can still apply to other universities with that scores. There's no such thing as a bad SAT score. You will always find a university out there that's gonna be within your SAT percentile range. So definitely just take it. Even if it's just to apply to your safeties, it's definitely worth taking.
Yeah, I think also about whether or not to submit it. I think those top schools, if you guys are aiming for top schools, I think you just have to remember that the admissions people, they can't unsee it once you submit it. So say, for example, you're applying to Columbia, for example, like you, and someone has a 1300, which is a good score, by the way, but that's obviously a little bit out of the range of Colombia. So I think obviously just remember, like, once they see that, they can't unsee it. So I think if you're applying to top schools, I think that's more of a deeper conversation that you should have, or a deeper thought that you should bring up.
When you apply, definitely look at your school's 25th percentile.
Yes, yeah, for sure.
75th percentile, and make sure that it's at least 25th percentile.
Yeah, could you just explain what that is for those people who don't know?
So the percentiles, it's available online for basically every college. Let's say you're aiming for Harvard, you can just search up Harvard University SAT score percentiles, and it'll tell you the 25th and the 75th percentile, and that is of the last year's application batch and like the average SAT scores within that batch. So you have an idea of what admitted applicants get, and you can see if you would also potentially be an admitted applicant with them.
And what would you say the best way to study for an SAT is? Obviously everyone has their personal preferences, and you can get tutors and things like that, but what would you say is your preferred method, or what you suggest people start with?
So before you start revising at all, definitely like sit down and do a practice test, so you know like where your strengths are, where your weaknesses are. When I sat down and like did the test for the first time, what I found was that the SAT English section just came like very, very naturally to me. So for example, like the SAT reading, I think I only got like 4 questions wrong the first time. So I didn't spend too much time on that section. The SAT grammar, I realized that was just a matter of memorizing rules. So it was just a matter of learning those rules. And what I recommend is the Erica Meltzer's SAT grammar guide. That really helped me out. The grammar section, honestly, I think that's the easiest place to pick up marks. SAT, math, College Panda is pretty great to just cover all the content.
Yeah.
But essentially, no matter what the section is, it's just a matter of practice, and practice under time conditions. Yeah,
I think for sure, because the SAT can only test a certain amount of things, and the repetition is crazy. Like, everything is always repeated. So as long as you remember like the question type, you can apply it to different formats and stuff.
And linking back to the SAT reading, what I find really interesting with SAT reading is that it's completely different from like any English test you're ever going to do.
Yeah.
Because like when you are in like IB English, for example, they always ask you like analyze, like read between the lines, think of what the author could say, think of multiple interpretations. SAT is not like that at all. It's literally what is written there, don't interpret at all. So you have to kind of shift your mentality to think very literally, because it is a standardized test. They can't give multiple correct answers.
Yeah, and I think you for sure have to at least sit one practice test before you go in, because going in without ever seeing the SAT before would be like, that would be terrible, because you would have no idea, because it's so different to like school and how they test. So yeah, you're right.
Sure.
Obviously it's different for each student, like how long it takes them to get prepared, but what would you recommend, like how long should you be preparing for the SAT before you actually give your SAT?
So obviously like that definitely varies person per person. It'll depend on what your score is the first time you take it and what you're trying to improve towards.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, I did something really stupid, which is I spent way too much time on the SAT, like way more than I needed to do. I did the March 2022 SAT. I started revising in December 2021.
Wow.
I spent all of winter break SAT prep. I would wake up every day SAT prep. I completely neglected my schoolwork, my extracurriculars. I just kind of put all that to the side and I focused on the SAT, which I think was very, very extreme. So I think definitely like find that balance.
Yeah.
Other parts of your applications have a lot more weight. Your extracurriculars, your essays, that's going to be more important to colleges than just like this one.
For sure. I think just a little fun question, like on test day, do you have any like rituals or recommendations that you would recommend to other people that kind of help you get yourself ready to take like the best test possible, or to get in the right mindset?
Try to have a good night's sleep, but that is like so much easier said than done. Like I was so anxious the night before. So stay hydrated and bring like a refreshing snack. Like don't bring chocolate or whatever, bring granola, bring fruit.
Since the SAT is a timed exam, what is something that you would recommend students to do during the exam so they can get like most number of questions done, or like any strategies that you followed that help you kind of make sure that you're not going over?
Yeah. So for the SAT reading, give yourself a set time per passage. So that's going to be different for everyone, but make sure you give a set amount of time and you always stick to that set amount of time and you practice. So for me, I'm like a very fast reader, so I gave myself 10 minutes per passage, including the questions. Some people 13 minutes. It really depends. So give yourself a time for the passages for sure. Don't give one passage too much time. Always practice with that dedicated time so it kind of becomes a routine. For the math section, honestly, I struggle with timing a lot. I don't really have much advice for that. But it just comes down to practicing with timing. And it's just one of those things where you just need to practice.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And I hope everyone who's listening has a better idea about the SAT and how to prepare for it. But thank you so much for coming on, and thank you guys for listening.